the fact that there was no tool between clicking behind the dog's ear and the Bayer test. And I literally felt it like it was this wide tunnel for me to move through. And once I realized that that was the scope for a veterinarian, I innovated the first digital hearing test for dogs and cats, utilizing frequencies. And the very common statements are, my dog's completely deaf, he has selective hearing, he doesn't listen to me anymore. But when the dog actually gets tested, very often they will have low frequency hearing that is still intact.
Welcome back to Veterinary Best Practices. I'm your host, Dana Panduro, Account Management Lead here at Digitail. With over 20 years of in-clinic experience, I am on a path to find how we can accelerate and revolutionize veterinary medicine. I'm so excited to learn from each and every member of the vet med community that we have here on the pod. Today's guest has a very interesting path to veterinary medicine. She gave up a career performing at Carnegie Hall and traded it all for a question inspired by her very own pets. What does the world actually sound like for animals, and what are we missing? Dr. Janet Marlow is a classically trained guitarist turned animal hearing wellness pioneer and the founder of Pet Acoustics. In today's conversation, Janet is going to take us through the science behind species-specific music, why 1 in 2 pets has some level of hearing loss, and how a 2-minute app-based hearing screening can become as standard in your practice as a dental exam. We'll also get into how sound affects behavior before the behavior even happens, and what that means for fear-free care and the feline medicalization gap. We are so excited to welcome Janet to Veterinary Best Practices. Janet, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to get to know more about you and about your work. And I want to start with your foundation as a classically trained musician who ended up going into animal wellness space. But can you talk a little bit about your transition within those, or the marriage of those two fields?
It's such a great question. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. And well, I was going to be a classical guitarist, and I studied in Spain and France, and I studied with the greats, and that was going to be my life. And then I debuted at Carnegie Hall, and I had managers, and I was touring and then recording the whole thing. And then one day, as I was practicing, my dogs and my cats would come to my side. It was just a particular day that I took deep notice of how relaxed their muscles were in a more deep way than just resting in a bed or on a couch. And that was just, I just took that acknowledgement. And then I started having curiosities. First of all, when I was a kid living in New York. I was born in London, but we moved to New York. My father was a well-known violinist and conductor. And when we lived in New York, there were no rescue shelters. There was no structure for animals. So there were dozens of kittens on the street being born and puppies being given away. And I was the kid that said, I'll take it. Or I would listen in the bushes and hear the kittens, and they'd come meowing out, and I'd say, coming home with me. But we lived in an apartment, and it was too much for my family, and it wasn't a lifestyle then to have an animal, so I had to give away a lot of animals. So when it came to my time to have dogs and cats, when I was a performer, then I needed as many as I could have. So I was the kid that brought every pet home, but once I finally had my home, I had many dogs and cats. So I did notice this profound, deep relaxation to the guitar playing and the singing that I was doing. One day, one of my cats, Osborne, who was a black and white cat, we had him for 15 years. He got severely injured in the woods. And for 2 days, we called and called and called. He finally came out. He was very badly injured. We took him to the ICU, and I went to sing to him for 5 days. Every day, I could see in his eyes that he was soothed by it, but he passed. So I'm still continuing with my career as a classical player. And then I just couldn't stop asking questions about animal hearing and what was it about the music that made such a difference. And I was so intrigued, then I started writing to universities and getting papers and saying, what do you know about, animal hearing? And I get reams of studies on dolphin hearing and bat hearing. But because I was a recording artist and my producer taught me how to mix, master, and edit music, I started thinking, okay, I'm before the computer and I'm thinking, what do animals really want to hear? What do they want to hear? Broad spectrums of sounds and trumpets blaring and, percussion coming in. It can't be that because of that original experience of the soft music and the singing. And so I came up with, after 3 years of research, I came up with the concept of species-specific music. In other words, Mozart didn't write for dogs, and how could I? And so I spent a lot of time writing music with very soft, long, sustaining instruments, no percussion, no voice, just something that an animal could relax into. And then I started refining that process after I had given out the music. I would go to every veterinarian, every friend that had anything that had 4 legs. I'd say, please try the music. And I started refining the process digitally, going into every note. And I have learned that certain frequencies were calming for an animal and certain frequencies were triggering hypervigilance. So I stayed away from those, and the result was amazing. People started ordering the music from all over the world, and I watched the process develop into this consciousness of utilizing species music for their animal. And that took, the timeline was 1994. I'm giving my age away. And 1997 was when I came up with the species-specific music. So I was the first one. And ever since then, I've been refining that process. And I gave up my career, by the way, and totally dedicated it to my energies and my passion and my curiosity to discovering what is it about sound that is a health environment for an animal. And then in 2009, I developed the corporation of Pet Acoustics.
That story is amazing to me for several reasons. You had just a remarkable career as a musician ahead of you. It sounds like a legacy career, so I'm sure that was something you were planning your entire life. Do you have a background in research, academia, science? It feels like such a exploration mindset to see these pets relaxing around you and think, how does this feel different than just my dog is sleeping in the corner, but certainly not the dulcet tones of this podcast or what's inspiring that. That's just kind of his MO. So there was something different about that moment for you. And it sparked such a great curiosity that you're reaching out to universities and collecting and consolidating research and then creating your own work out of it. When you were collecting animals, were you also researching as a kid? Like, that is such a unique trait.
It's an excellent question, Dana. When you are a musician, you are working with frequency, vibration, and tone. And I have to share with your audience that not only was I a guitarist, but I was a 10-string guitarist, which is a new innovation. It was a new innovation then. I studied with Maestro Narciso Yepes in Spain, who innovated the instrument, and it's 4 extra bass strings. So I was already even though I wasn't calling myself a scientific researcher then, but I was immersed into the vibration of producing music and the circle of the being a performer and the circle of providing music for an audience. I find that to be a wonderful circle. And when you're a musician, you really are a science. And there are a lot of musicians who are scientists and a lot of scientists that study the cello. Don't ask me why they study the cello. There's so many dentists I've met that I play the cello and they love it because the two are dealing with the ethereal environment and how it affects the human body. So I think intuitively, it just evolved.
It does. And I will just say anecdotally, I was helping my friend find a practitioner we're looking for an oncologist. And one of them mentioned that he played the cello, and I was like, I think that's a good sign. Then we had a long conversation of within which specialties in medicine do we think would best be highlighted by that instrument. Like, you'd want a surgeon who's maybe like a first violinist, very like
Yes.
in control and
Yes.
confident.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we could do that for the next hour.
Yes. Yeah. See, there's a reality to it.
Yes, yes. They're parallel modalities. So then
Yes.
bridging veterinary medicine and focus on audiology. Why do you think that hearing is something that's not generally assessed or thought of in wellness practices in veterinary spaces?
I think it's just a tool gap. There's two parts to it. One, when I first started out in 1997, I looked at some veterinary textbooks to see how much there is on hearing, not the function of the ear, but on hearing. And there was a page and a half in veterinary textbooks then. It's changed somewhat, but still the focus is not like I could provide like 5 chapters tomorrow if they asked me for textbooks to help veterinarians understand how hearing affects the animal. But there's I think it's just a tool gap. And because of that, about 4 years ago, because all the music sound therapy that I've produced through the years eventually moved me into the functionality of the canine and feline ear, as well as I do equine and birds as well. The fact that there was no tool between clicking behind the dog's ear and the Bayer test. And I literally felt it like it was this wide tunnel for me to move through. And once I realized that that was the scope for a veterinarian, I innovated the first digital hearing test for dogs and cats, utilizing frequencies, because that's what I base everything on. So high frequency, mid frequency, and low frequency. So when a dog and a cat go through life, now I've done varying studies that show data, and we can talk about that. But for example, a lot of senior dog pet parents have been taking the hearing test, the Pet Acoustics app test.
Yes.
And the very common statements are, my dog's completely deaf, he has selective hearing, he doesn't listen to me anymore. But when the dog actually gets tested, very often they will have low frequency hearing that is still intact. So when a veterinarian does the clicking and clapping behind the ears or dropping a clipboard, which, by the way, is very unfear-free because it causes startle reaction. So that none of those processes help a veterinarian know the distinction of the gradation of the score of what a dog or cat hears. And the Bayer test, which was invented in 1971 and is the gold standard, costs money. You have to go to a specialist. The dog and cat sometimes they go under sedation because it is a high stress experience for them. And then they have to attach electrodes because they're determining, it's really meant for humans. And so I needed to create something that was going to be natural sounding for the animal. I can describe the test to you. I think you told me before we started that you did the test for your dog. Why don't we start with your experience first?
Yeah, so for any listeners, it was very easy, and it was something that I could do as a pet parent. It wasn't something that would have to be, I would feel very comfortable talking to my clients and saying, hey, why don't you test this in a less stimulating environment? You're going to download this app, you create a quick login and agree to the terms and conditions. And then it was a series of 3 different audio scapes. High frequency, mid, and low. And I just had my dog sit next to me, and then I played each one and just noted his response in the app. And afterwards, I got an email summary basically saying this was the result that you experienced and whether I should be consulting with my veterinarian as a response to that. But it was very, very simple, very easy to go through, took truly less than 2 minutes. And yeah, it wasn't alarming to my dog. It wasn't like you were saying, it was very fear-free coded. Yes. In the sense that there was no like car, a horn, or loud siren or anything that caused any kind of jolt or anxiety. He essentially was sleeping next to me, and I just was noting his ear twitches as he was listening to those.
Yes.
So for him, he had a larger response, was up and looking around to the first noise, the one before the cricket, and then had less of a response and pretty much no response to the mid and low frequency noises for him.
Yes. And how old is your dog?
He's 11. Or no,
Okay.
he's 10. He's not that old yet, but he's blind. So he's a mini Australian Shepherd, and he's losing his sight. He has degenerative retinal atrophy. So he can still see like large shadows.
Yes.
But he's depending a lot on actually sound cues, which I trained him, of course, on visual cues.
Yeah.
So now he's to pay attention a little bit more to auditory cues. And then, of course, his sniffer is working really well for him too.
Of course.
That's harder to adapt. Oh, it's
Yeah.
amazing. Harder to adapt training around that though, because I need to alert him like when steps are coming up or when he's going to, need to come to me and how to do that. And so we're trying to do that with some stomps, like some taps on the floor and stomps on the floor so he can kind of feel and adapt to that. That's been where we've been with Ori for a while. It's been an interesting journey.
It'd be interesting to see how you use the sound therapy as a guide for maneuvering around your home.
Yeah.
Because it would be a trigger. He would be able to follow that, because in the app, there's also sound therapy for dogs and cats. I'd love to interject a story based on what you just described with your dog. I had a call from a pet parent recently who was describing that he had two dogs. One was 13 years old and one was 7 years old. And they've been best buds right from the beginning, since they were both shelter dogs and he adopted them. And recently the 13-year-old had passed. And about a week later, the pet parent had noticed that he had been calling the dog and the dog had no response. So long story short, his 7-year-old was completely deaf because he took the hearing test and discovered that the dog had no response to any of the sounds and learned that the dog had been following his pal as the cue for living wherever they were. And I mean,
That's so sweet.
That's an amazing story to show how important it is to utilize hearing wellness from puppy, kitten, all the way up to geriatric living, because we've done over 50,000 hearing tests. Early on, about a year ago, I took data from 10,000 tests of dogs and cats of people that have downloaded the hearing screening globally. There are 76 countries that have participated. And these are pet parents, veterinarians, vet techs, kennels, animal shelters, all kinds of people. And what was the most striking data from these 10,000 screenings was that 1 in 2 pets has some partial hearing loss. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, well, there is a curve that goes from, puppy kitten, and then for about 7 years, everything's cool. And then the hearing starts to descend a little bit later we parallel, our biology is so in parallel with humans, so with animals. But that was a really striking fact to understand that, which proves how important it is to have longitudinal understanding of hearing wellness, which is missing from veterinary care.
In reviewing that data, so we have 50,000 screenings done. 1 in 2 pets are experiencing some level of decreased hearing. Were there any other trends that surprised you? Anything else in the data that you were not anticipating?
Yes. Well, apart from the prevalence, and also what I was very impressed with is how many repeat uses of the hearing test had been done through over a 2-year period. So it wasn't just that people had done it one and done, and then it was fun and they know, but they were actually saying, hey, if this is the case, in another 6 months, they were testing again.
I think that's So important. And I talk about in the context of blood work, I'm a big advocate for pre-anesthetic blood work for spays and neuters. And that's usually a 6-month-old healthy dog. And what that allows us to do is we always have ranges. So, within the large data set of dogs, this is a range that we consider to be normal. But it is so helpful for me to know what is specific to that pet. So in 2 years, they eat something weird and we're doing lab work. In 3 years, if we have that historical when we think they're otherwise healthy, there's the obvious we want to catch if they're not healthy and we want to intervene before we put them under anesthesia. But we want to know what is normal for that pet, and we want to track trends over time that allows us to say, hey, he's very stressed, so he traditionally shows up with these, markers that are elevated. We're not going to consider that, prevalently in our diagnostic path today. Or inversely, these are only mildly elevated levels. Normally I would dismiss them, but given their history, I really want to focus in on these renal values and see what we can do for some early intervention. And I feel like it lends itself to, in this hearing test, is we're creating a baseline for this pet and then making sure that we're tracking their growth through that as other aspects of their health change. I'm really stricken by the behavioral implications of these hearing tests. Like you and I were just talking about my dog who's blind, and I'm trying to give him audible cues, and now I'm finding that he at least is more responsive to higher frequency cues. So I'm thinking, how can I incorporate that? Because it's not going to be helpful for me to be trying to contact him in a way that he is not hearing very well. So I know that there's been a lot of work that you've done with pet acoustics in exam rooms as kind of a soundscape to help support behavioral comfort during a veterinary trip. Can you walk us through what that actually looks like for veterinarians that are utilizing your work in their clinical space?
Yes. Well, first, I want to share the statement that sound comes before behavior. You can see that very obviously in a cat, for example. Take any video of a cat. We just did the hearing test in an animal shelter with lots of cats, and it's so obvious that the sound is pressure in the ear. And it's only when it gets into the cochlea with the cilia responding. The cilia is like a hearing organ. They all represent different frequencies. And so those cilia bend, and then that eventually, when it doesn't rebound, that's when hearing loss occurs. So very often in veterinary care, behavior is seen and it's evaluated as behavior. But what we need to do is take it to that step before the behavior to understand that it might be some kind of hearing loss. And just imagine adding that perception as a veterinarian or a vet tech to say, hey, this is not just, so we don't want to just assume everything is behavior when it can be the environment. So human beings are egotistical. We perceive the world, and we very often perceive the world for animals from our perspective. And the hearing exam really helps take that out of the equation and give the specific data to the veterinarian to utilize in an exam. Not only that, but if there's a pet parent standing there, which I've been many, many times in the exam room, now this opens up like, hey, this is not just anxiety, take this Prozac and go home and the thunderstorms will be fine, when might be something that is hearing related. And that changes everything. It changes the communication with the pet parent. It gives an option to address it. With pet acoustics, when we work with veterinarians, we have follow-up guidelines for pet parents to have given by the veterinarian. We have PDF guides. So the whole to answer your question from the very beginning, I am part of the movement to close the feline medicalization gap. And this will answer the question from that line of thinking. The cat is home. I used to have a cat named Oliver. He was gorgeous. He was an incredible hunter. He was big and beautiful. And I used to put him in a crate and put him in the car. And for 15 minutes, I swear he said the word horror. He was just saying, I know, it was terrible. He would say, horror, horror. I mean, he was totally, totally terrified. What if a pet parent starts playing the Pet Acoustics sound therapy, which for the cat, which is designed for feline hearing, which we have proven biometrically to lower cortisol levels, to raise HRV, to lower pulse rate. Proven. The music goes on an app, on a speaker, then it goes into the crate. The cat goes into the crate. Now cat is maintaining cortisol level. Gets into the car. Cortisol level goes up. Gets into the lobby. Maybe it gets up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Now it goes to the vet in front of the vet tech who does all the veterinarian will be with you, da-da-da-da, your cat's beautiful, da-da-da, and the music is continuing to play. Now the environment is capturing the cat's hearing, and it's not responding to everything else that's going on. Now the cortisol level starts to maintain itself, and by the time the veterinarian comes into the room for the exam, the cat is maintaining its environmental behavior to be able to have a proper exam because
they're more trusting and they're more calm, and we're not seeing them in a more elevated space.
Yes.
And just to kind of, I guess, bring this home, I will try and find this so we can put it in the show notes. There was a study, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, where it was pre-COVID, so it's been a while. But they interviewed veterinary industry workers and said, what's the number one reason you think people don't bring their pets in for wellness exams? They're not compliant. And across the board, we answered money. We think it's money. People don't want to spend the money, can't afford it. It's, it's an audacious, and veterinary medicine is largely expensive right now. It's probably a good topic to get into on another day. Yes. But then they went and they surveyed pet owners, and they said, what's the number one reason that maybe you missed your last exam? And they actually said it was stress to the pet, or perceived stress to the pet. Yes. And so while finances were certainly up there, people were not coming in for those wellness screenings and to see, because they are aware that their pets are experiencing stress and they want to minimize that. And I've seen all of these, those of us who have gone to veterinary conferences, there's always something about, stress reduction, fear-free. And we do olfactory things like feel away to help calm them. And I'm also just taken, there's always a class that's like Disney level customer service, elevating the customer service. And it's always focused on Disney. Disney does soundscapes. One of the things that allows you to be immersed in Disney is not just the garbage bins that are set 8 feet apart and all the metrics, is that when you're in Star Wars land, they have birds that sound like Star Wars land. And it's like, how have we missed sound from this conversation? How have we missed this important way that we can impact and give also our pet parents a sense of ownership in that too? They have the app, they're downloading it, they're preparing their pet. We often counsel them, like, take out the carrier a couple days ahead of time, spray it with Feel Away. These are the things that you can do to help your pet have an easier trip. And now there's this thing that's very accessible and has been proven to work. And I want to spread the word.
Yes.
And I would love for you to educate our audience a little bit more. Pet Acoustics is not just spa music. It's not just a calming vibe that a human might enjoy. Mm-hmm. How can you explain the science of your composition and your approach in creating these soundscapes for pets?
Yes. So first, I do everything opposite that I have learned all of my life as a classical player. No loud volume levels. The volume level that I do for the pet is within the comfort zone of that species. So the volume level is a certain decibel level. I can share with your audience that pets, dogs and cats, are the most comfortable between 50 and 80 decibels in a room. And they can download a free decibel meter on there. There's quite a few on
Oh yeah, I have an app for that. I have 2 young kids, and I felt like the first year everywhere I go, I'd be like, can I go to this restaurant? And I pulled out my decibel reader because I didn't want to have her little ears.
That's so impressive. So impressive of you.
We'll get her to concerts one day. Yeah, but we gotta,
Yeah, well, it's true, because you want to protect your kids' ears, because that it is a real thing. Exposure to loud volume over time diminishes hearing. Animals, humans. Yeah, so... and then I alter the frequency content. In other words, I've got frequency readers of the music that I've composed, first I do it intuitively as a composer, and then I go in digitally and I modify everything. So it's like making chocolate layer cake. It's like I do this layer, then I do this layer of sound, and then I keep building, and you can actually see it, varying layers on digital composing programs. And then I go into every note, then I analyze, I'm analyzing, I'm refining. It's taking it through millions of sifters. And then you master it, because the master is the feel of the music. How is that going to be in the environment of a dog or the environment of a cat? That's what I do. It, it's kind of a very painstaking process, but the end result is a beautiful thing to see, because the animal feels safe, it feels connected, it can release that muscles, going back to my original dogs and cats when I played guitar, that initial release depth of muscle calm. And it also becomes a trigger. I have a dog named Cody. He's a Cavapoo. He's 2 years old. He's adorable, very spunky and very beautiful. And since he's 13 weeks, he's been immersed in the Pet Acoustics canine music. And it still amazes me. Like, we'll be having dinner, I have his bed nearby, and I say, go to your place. I put on the music, and within seconds, he goes to his bed and he curls up. The music becomes an association of this is calm time.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that for any animal at any age. For example, shelter dogs, that I give them a score from 1 to 10. They usually live from 7 to 10. Even when you bring them home for adoption, they're still in that 7 to 10 level, because they've never experienced calm. They've never, and if they have, it's long forgotten. So the music is a process by which you can use as a therapeutic tool. And it's been amazing. For 25 years, I've had the use of that music, even in horses. We did a study of 120 Arabian horses. They're the most nervous. And it was done at the University of Lublin in Poland. And they did a year's study, 90 horses with, 90 horses without. And after taking cortisol blood work from the ones with the music, they learned that it had lowered cortisol levels in horses. And because they were so relaxed and confident, they won more races. This was Pet Acoustics equine music. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in this study, or through this, maybe we can extrapolate, there's not just the acute benefits of maybe helping them feel calm as they load in the carrier, or helping them in their stall as they prepare for a big show.
Yes.
But there's a continued and documented improvement even when they're not actively hearing the pet acoustics. Is that my understanding?
Yeah. Wow. That's called wellness.
I've heard of it.
That's what
incredible.
Wellness is. Yeah. That's why it's pet hearing health.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Pet Acoustics is an ecosystem from the home to the veterinarian to whatever activity is going to follow. Mm-hmm. And it can be done with understanding how your animal hears throughout its lifetime, adjusting accordingly. Veterinary wellness exams is also as we're integrating now into their practices, because the exam it's because the hearing test is 2 minutes long. It gives it helps the communication with the pet parent. It's a learning. It helps the social interaction. It helps anxiety. It helps cognitive aging. There's so many factors to the wellness life of an animal that I think in time, and I'm working very hard on this, that this will become part of the standard care of animals, so that we are addressing this big gap in exam rooms, along with dental and heart and checking their teeth and checking the ear.
It's funny you bring up dentistry, because, not to date myself, but when I started out in veterinary medicine, if you recommended a dental cleaning, it was like I was offering to put a party hat on their dog or dye it purple.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't thought of as a core part of wellness. And now we have Dental Pet Month. And within my clinic, we say we have 3 puppy visits, and we prioritize education around one field in one of those visits. And one of the things we prioritize is education around dental cleaning and home care maintenance, because ideally I don't want to see them for a mouthful of extractions. I would love to
Yes.
be, a collaborative partner in their long-term oral
Mhm.
health.
Yes.
In your ideal stage, what information would, like you mentioned, you have your 2-year-old Cavapoo, what information would pet owners be given early on in the dog's life to carry, like to kind of anchor in terms of their hearing care for that pet?
Yes. So for a pet parent should know that exposure to loud sounds, like say, for example, they have speakers on a bare wooden floor and your dog is, sequestered to that room and they've got low bass notes. This is not good for an animal. It will cause damage over time. And they should be in a room with 50 to 80 decibels of sound. If you are exposing them to cats, very often will find the sweet spot in a room because they understand where the high frequencies are, which is disturbing to them and also is an intrigue for them. Like when a cat is staring out the window, they're probably hearing high frequencies, which can also, you should be aware in your home where, computers have high frequencies, refrigerators have high frequencies. There's a lot that can be agitating. I think overall, the observation of your animal's ears, of your pet's ears, is the indication of where their pet hearing health is. It's very important to understand that they hear, a dog hears at a 600th of a second sound. So again, sound is very important. I observe my dog's hearing all the time. And I apologize sometimes because I'm saying, I'm sorry I brought you too close to that fire engine, or let's not even talk about fireworks, which is like putting an animal next to, a cannon or, explosions at 150 decibels. I wish we would go into the beautiful, like in France, they do projections and the drones.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah,
We'll get there eventually. We'll get there
we'll
eventually.
get there. My city's enacted a firework ban, which working in veterinary space is great in
Yeah.
terms of I don't want to be sending a ton of sedatives out the door. And then you get to have a conversation with pet owners where there's a difference between an anti-anxiety medication, things that we can do, like many pets, maybe it is playing some music, finding some distraction for them, being with them, finding some comfort things. Maybe some pets are going to need a pharmaceutical anti-anxiety. And then we have a couple pets that need sedation. I have a pet that ran through a glass door one year because he was so stressed. So he gets more heavily sedated because we don't want him to harm himself. But there's that understanding that pet owners need to have of we can take away their mobility and their ability to act on that anxiety, but that doesn't take away that anxiety. And it's not as simple as just, it's 4th of July, here's your pill. We're going to go out to the barbecue and we'll be back later. Like we need to set these pets up for success given the fact that the outside world is exploding to them.
And another thing that in response to that experience, body regulation for an animal takes time, and I think people we kind of move them in our lives according to our speed, but they actually live slower than us, even though their responses are faster, but they live slower than us, and they need that regulation time. We recommend, and a lot of veterinarians are now using the sound therapy for after a visit for, half an hour, just immersing them so that they have that calm down time. They're bringing their cortisol level down because it's very stressful to go into a veterinary experience. Although with fear-free and so many, excuse me, other methods and approaches, it's changing a lot. It's changing as we speak, and it's really valuable. But for decades, we're still kind of catching up to some kind of 1950s approach. But I very impressed with. I love the animal veterinary world because I come from the musical world, which is very, very tough. And, you're dealing with competition and humans and all that good stuff. But I just find that it's a very open, scientific, intellectual arena where people share ideas. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. And
Oh, yeah.
again, working very hard to bring what I've developed to the veterinary world so that it can become, a standard care along with all the other exams that go on. And also want to mention that the hearing wellness screen is also a billable part of veterinary care. It introduced. I'm going to read a list because there was this particular thing aspect of veterinary care is so important. So it introduces hearing wellness into veterinary medicine as an important component of overall health and well-being. It differentiates a practice as a leader in preventative and comprehensive companion animal care. It establishes a hearing wellness baseline that can be monitored throughout a pet's life. It provides a professional PDF, as you mentioned, report that can be shared with clients and added to patient records. It creates meaningful conversations and education opportunities with pet parents. It enhances the value of the wellness exam. It supports evaluation of issues that may affect behavior, anxiety, and training. It helps identify potential hearing concerns, and it requires no specialized equipment or sedation. And it takes 2 minutes, and there you have it.
And what a remarkable experience to come into a veterinary space. Like you mentioned, it sets you apart as someone who's very invested in a high quality standard of care, someone who's very invested in partnering with that pet. And I don't know that many people have experienced that. So for all of us cutting edge people who are hungry for knowledge, now would be the time to start this in your practice. You're going to stand out. And that's something that they're going to probably talk about with their friends. What did you do today? I took them to the vet. They actually did this hearing assessment. I had not experienced that before. How many of us have experienced that, as a pet parent? So I love that. You've talked about a goal of yours, which is to integrate with practice management systems. And I would love to know, we're from Digitail, so we're also invested in ongoing success of our clinics and helping them achieve a higher standard of care. What is your vision for that integration? What would that future state look like?
Yes, I'm very interested. Well, first of all, a person can start today by trying the app, the Pet Acoustics Plus app, and trying that one hearing test with that one pet. The goal is to offer veterinary clinics the hearing test for multiple pets every month with greater communication. My hope is that the next generation of veterinarians, which is now, is going to use the hearing screening not just as a specialty concern, but as part of every exam. And with that 2 minutes, it will open up a world of understanding animals on such a deeper level and giving them great care, because veterinarians, that's why they got into the field to begin with. And this will give them another tool that is going to be easy, quick, and profound.
Love that. That's a great summary. Couldn't have said it better. We love to offer tangible, practical takeaways for our listeners, things they can do today to start integrating some of the themes that we've talked about. We've mentioned the Pet Acoustics app. Everyone should download it. Everyone, I'm sure, listening has a pet. So within the next 10 minutes, you could have completed your first hearing exam with one of your pets. And then a decibel. My thought is I'm going to go through my clinic with a decibel reader and see how I can make my exam rooms, my waiting rooms, my kennel areas more comfortable environment for pets. What are some other key practical takeaways or resources that people can look into?
Yes, I've written 8 books. They're all digital downloads, and it's called What Pets Hear series. It's very in-depth. It describes anything you would need. These would be very good for a veterinary textbook. So, but they're entertaining and fluid and very easy to read. So I highly recommend them. They're on my Pet Acoustics website. I also have varying studies published and peer-reviewed, Journal of Equine Veterinary Science and the International Animal Health journals, all with the biometric studies on audiology that I've done and also on the sound therapy. You know, I did a study that was inspired by Dr. Temple Grandin. She gave me a call. I get that out of the blue. She gave me a call and said to me, Janet, you should, and what a brilliant woman. I mean, she's been significant in our field. She said, Janet, you should prove that your music is beneficial biometrically over classical music, because classical music, and as you know, I'm fifth generation classical musician. People use classical music because they think it's a little on the, it's calming. It sounds calming, but it is not designed for animals. And I did make that proof with biometric collars to show pulse rate, HRV, and activity level. And we compared it with no music, classical music, and pet acoustics music. And so I did prove that. So there's lots of proof and studies to read as a resource to understand, because I know veterinarians are they're skeptical, and they should be skeptical, and any question they have, I can show them the answer.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this discussion and for introducing our audience to a whole new area of wellness and giving us some very practical things we can do today, either to learn more or to start integrating these into our practices. So thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation, Janet.
Thank you so much, Dana. My pleasure.
This was such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much to Dr. Marlow for her time. What strikes me most is how accessible all of these changes are. A 2-minute app, a free decibel meter, a walk through your clinic with a fresh set of ears. None of this requires a major overhaul, a huge financial investment, or a long training. It simply requires paying attention to something we've been overlooking or overhearing. For anyone listening who wants to learn more about pet acoustics, download the Hearing Screening app or explore Janet's research and What Pets Hear book series. We'll have everything linked in the show notes. And if today's episode made you think differently about your exam room, your waiting area, or how we talk to pet parents about their senior dog's selective hearing, we'd love to hear about it. Leave us a review, share this with a colleague, and we'll see you on the next episode of Veterinary Best Practices.